The talk that I'm going to present to you now is somewhat different than most of those in this seminar. It's titled Blue Growth and Blue Justice, 10 Risks and Solutions for the Ocean Economy. And it provides both a critical as well as constructive examination of the social sustainability side of the blue economy. The talk, it's based on a paper that several colleagues and I published under the same title. It was a collaboration between myself, Jessica Blythe of Brock University, Carol White of University of East Anglia, and Cecilia Campero of the University of British Columbia. In the paper, basically, we review existing literature to highlight 10 social injustices that might be produced by blue growth. And then we explore how they might be avoided to achieve blue justice for coastal communities and small-scale fishers. As we all know, the idea of the blue economy has been receiving quite a bit of attention in recent years in global and national policy discussions. Oceans are increasingly viewed as a new frontier for economic development, with projections that the ocean economy could double in the coming decades. And indeed, many national governments and corporate actors are promoting a blue growth agenda. This can be seen in the European Union's Blue Growth Strategy, South Africa's Operation Ficasa, Scotland and Canada's Blue Economy strategies, and so forth. The blue economy is also one of the central focal areas of most global ocean meetings and conferences in recent years. This can be seen, for example, at the upcoming United Nations Oceans Conference. And while the blue economy is a term that is often used simply as a shorthand for all forms of economic development in the oceans, the original vision for the blue economy that was put forward by small island developing states, otherwise known as large ocean states, was for a form of ocean development that was both equitable as well as sustainable. Yet, as companies and governments race to capitalize on marine resources, blue growth can pose substantial risks for both people and the environment. The dominant discourse that frames blue growth as beneficial for the economy, for developing nations, and for coastal communities risks downplaying the uneven distribution of potential benefits and also the risk of substantive harms. Of course, blue growth is often happening in areas of the marine and coastal environment that are used, relied on, and lived in by coastal peoples. There's an estimated 600 million people living on the coast worldwide, and this includes more than 12 or 14 million small-scale fishers, with as many as 260 million jobs in fisheries sectors worldwide. Furthermore, Selig and colleagues estimate that there's 775 million people worldwide who have a high dependence on the oceans. And of course, claims to marine resources and space are based on much more than use and benefits. We must also consider rights, tenure, adjacency, security, and cultural connections of nations, small-scale fishers, indigenous people, and coastal communities. And because the seas are peopled, it is necessary to understand and integrate the human dimensions into decision-making related to the ocean economy, to help us avoid the potential social harms of the blue economy and instead maximize social benefits. The marine social sciences are thus a critical tool to make evidence-informed decisions related to the blue economy. Indeed, the marine social sciences can help us to understand and address social injustices that are occurring related to the blue economy. Furthermore, engaging directly with a social science critique of ocean development is fundamental to avoiding the risks and achieving a more just, inclusive, and equitable ocean economy. But it's not just social scientists who have been critiquing the blue economy. Both civil society organizations and academics have been sounding the alarm about emergent issues related to the ocean economy for a number of years. Many civil society organizations, most notably the World Forum on Fisher People, the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers, and the Transnational Institute, are pushing back against ocean grabbing and blue justice issues that are being perpetrated by blue growth. This is exemplified by this report from a few years back titled The Global Ocean Grab, a Primer, and a paper that I published with several co-authors in 2015 where we defined ocean grabbing as dispossession or appropriation of use, control, or access to ocean space and resources from prior resource users, rights holders, or inhabitants. Muniba Isaacs, as well as other researchers from the Too Big to Ignore network and others from around the world, have also been documenting environmental and social injustices occurring as a result of past ocean-based development activities, including industrial fisheries, aquaculture, oil and gas development, blue carbon markets, and they have issued calls for greater attention to blue justice. Moreover, this increasing attention to ocean grabbing and blue justice can be seen as part of an ongoing critique of the restructuring of rules and authority over the access, use, and management of marine resources in areas of the oceans. Yet, in our view, the risks of social and environmental injustices from blue growth are still insufficiently recognized by those advocating for substantial increases to economic development activities in the ocean. Thus, we explored past injustices produced by ocean-based economic development through a qualitative review of the literature. The central question guiding our inquiry was, what social injustices can result from the ocean economy? We used a qualitative or narrative review approach for this research, and we did this to allow for patterns and themes to emerge from a broad exploration of the literature on this topic. The steps that we employed included, first, we conducted an initial systematic search of the literature using key terms. Second, we allowed themes related to the central question to emerge through open coding of titles and abstract, and this produced broadly 10 main categories of injustice. And then third, we supplemented the narrative review through additional searches of the literature for empirical examples. In brief, our review highlighted 10 risks or social injustices that might result from the blue economy. Our results showed that the blue economy might lead to dispossession, displacement, and ocean grabbing by undermining spatial and resource access rights. The blue economy might produce environmental justice concerns from pollution and waste. The blue economy might produce environmental degradation and reduction of availability of ecosystem services. The blue economy might undermine livelihoods of small-scale fishers. The blue economy might lead to lost access to marine resources needed for food security and well-being in coastal communities. The blue economy might lead to an inequitable distribution of economic benefits, with elites capturing the benefits and few of those benefits flowing to local communities. The blue economy might produce various forms of social and cultural impacts in coastal communities. The blue economy might marginalize women. The blue economy might potentially produce human and indigenous rights abuses. And the blue economy might exclude local stakeholders and rights holders from decision-making and governance process. Now, due to the short length of this presentation, I'm not going to go any further into each of these topics here. This is just a teaser for the paper, which is published in Marine Policy, if you want to read more. And we also published this as an open access working paper under the title of Blue Growth and Blue Justice, and that's available online. But what I want to do now is I want to move over to a discussion of solutions, because the paper is not intended just as a critique for critique's sake. Rather, through our critique, we aim to directly highlight the worst case scenarios and stimulate a rigorous dialogue about how to avoid these types of issues. Thus, in the remainder of this talk, I'm going to focus on solutions to achieve a more just and inclusive blue economy. So an obvious starting place for a discussion of solutions is to offer the opposite of the 10 social injustices that we have identified in this paper as a set of recommendations for avoiding injustices and promoting more just outcomes during blue growth. Following this logic, our review suggests 10 key issues that require attention to achieve blue justice. And those are shown in Figure 1, which is highlighted here on this slide. And building on this, we provide 10 corresponding recommendations, which are to recognize and protect resource and spatial tenure and access rights, take a precautionary approach to reduce pollution and ensure that environmental burdens are not placed on marginalized populations. Third, minimize the impacts of development on habitats, resources, and ecosystem services. 4, consider and safeguard the access rights and livelihoods of small-scale fishers. 5, Maintain and promote access to marine resources needed for food security and well-being. 6, develop policies and mechanisms to foster and ensure the equitable distribution of economic benefits. 7, monitor, mitigate, and manage the social and cultural impacts of ocean development. 8, recognize, include, and promote the equal role of women in the ocean economy. 9, recognize and protect human and indigenous rights. And 10, develop inclusive and participatory planning and governance processes for ocean development. The need to address these issues in development is already highlighted in existing international declarations and voluntary agreements. This includes, for example, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Rights, the voluntary guidelines for small-scale fishers, just to name a few. And these types of ideals and norms are also codified in corporate social responsibility principles. Most of the high-level agreements and policy documents, however, don't specifically focus on the oceans. And furthermore, there's insufficient attention to norms of inclusiveness and equity in many of the policy deliberations, documents, and guidance that it's related to the blue economy. So we also argue that an explicit social justice framing ought to guide individual projects and decision-making processes related to the ocean economy. The literature on social justice, environmental justice, just transitions, and just transformations defines 3 broad dimensions: recognitional justice, procedural justice, as well as distributional justice. Recognitional justice refers to the acknowledgement of and respect for pre-existing governance arrangements, as well as the distinct rights, worldviews, knowledge, needs, livelihoods, histories, and cultures of different groups and decisions. Procedural justice refers to the level of participation and inclusiveness of decision-making and the quality of governance processes. Distributional justice can be defined as fairness in the distribution of benefits and harms of decisions and actions to different groups. These dimensions of justice might provide a broad overarching framework or a set of key considerations or practical steps that might guide national or even international policy deliberations on ocean-based economic development, or those actions that are taken when planning site-specific ocean development activities. This might range from renewable energy initiatives to fisheries or to aquaculture. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about this, we expand on these practical steps in another published paper titled Just Transformations to Sustainability. Finally, I want to be a bit provocative. Transforming the ocean economy to achieve blue justice may not be a simple task, and tinkering at the margins of state or corporate-led economic development may be insufficient. Achieving blue justice may require a substantial change to ocean governance to include new actors and visions. It may require a rethinking of our fundamental assumptions regarding development, a reimagining of novel or alternative models of development, or a complete paradigm shift regarding the need for growth. A transformation of ocean government may entail a substantial change in who is involved in decision-making processes and in the way that decisions are made. For example, ocean governance requires greater representation of and influence from small island developing states, civil society organizations, and indigenous peoples. Rethinking our fundamental assumptions regarding ocean-based development would require us to start by asking, why are these injustices occurring, and why do they persist? Responses to these questions may yield very challenging answers about unequal global power differentials and resource grabs, neoliberal and capitalist models of governance, and corporate cultures that place profits before people and planet. Imagining new or alternative models of development would require the flipping of this logic to instead place environmental sustainability, planet, and human well-being, people, before corporate profits. Ideas such as regenerative ocean development, community-based blue economies, or community-supported fisheries show some promise here. However, scaling these ideas up and out may be challenging. Finally, some authors might go much further and ask whether it is wise to even consider increasing the scale and scope of economic development in the ocean, and instead argue for a blue degrowth paradigm. Blue degrowth should especially be a consideration when there is evidence of drawing down of natural resources that people rely on for food security or human well-being. In summary, in this talk and the associated paper, we review how rapid and unchecked blue growth can produce numerous environmental and social injustices. Through a review and critique of past injustices, our aim is to stimulate a rigorous dialogue on how to achieve a more just and inclusive ocean economy. We conclude that a commitment to blue justice needs to be at the core of the blue growth agenda. It's only through recognizing and addressing past social injustices related to the ocean economy directly and head-on that we can hope to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals pledge to leave no one behind. I thank you for your time and for listening. I welcome additional contact via email, or you can check out my website or some of the papers that I've mentioned here if you want more information.
Thank you, Nathan.